Welcome back to All Access Fest. Before we get started, I want to remind you of the chat and the Q&A feature to the right of your screen. This is where you can introduce yourself and chat with each other, and also where we will pull questions for the Q&A at the end of the panel. And with that, I would like to introduce our next session, Record Labels, Management Companies, and Managing Expectations, moderated by Katie Holmes, the Director of Business Development at ROSTR.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session today. We're so excited to be here. As Mia mentioned, I'm Katie. I am the Director of Business Development at ROSTR. You've probably heard of some of our products like Jobs by ROSTR, Stack by ROSTR, and of course, our ROSTR product. But I wanted to give everyone on the panel here a chance to introduce themselves, and so you can get to know them a little bit more before we get going. So Andale, can I throw it to you first?
Yes. Hi, guys. My name is Andale. I'm the CEO and founder of Fractal, a boutique talent management company based here in Los Angeles. And I manage artists like Ian Dior, Abby Anderson, Lancey Foe, and a female producer named Viron.
Amazing. Stephanie, I'll throw it to you. Oh, I think you're muted still. Not yet. Still not yet. All right, we'll go to Max really quickly while we work on this issue.
Whereas my name is Max Weinberg, VP Marketing at Interscope Capital Label Groups. We're one of the largest major labels, about 300 to 400 active artists, and then I focus mainly on our dance and rock repertoire.
Awesome. And Joe?
Hello, I'm Joe Abood. I'm the founder of a company called 444 Sounds. We do artist and label services and management for artists, songwriters, and producers.
Amazing. And Stephanie, back to you. Still not. We'll give it another second. No worries. All right, well, we're fixing this technical issue. We'll just jump into it. As mentioned before, everyone on here is an expert in record labels, management companies, managing expectations, one of the three, all of the three, and we're just really excited for everyone to be here today to answer some questions. First question, as we know, a lot of people listening in are at the beginning of their careers, looking at maybe internships or entry-level roles. Question for all of you. How did internships and those entry-level roles help guide your careers to where you are today? And whoever wants to jump in.
I'll start that it's good to learn both the good and bad of it. Like one of the most beneficial internships I had was I worked for a PR company, and I honestly despised it. It was awful. It was like I was just not the fit for me. It was terrible experience, but it was great because I was a freshman in college, and it was 3 months of my life where I learned PR is not my thing. Like, good to know there. And then there's things like there was a record label that I interned for. And I just really wanted to work for that label. And I was forced to not forced, but the way I could get in was doing digital there. And then I learned like this was, 10, 12, 13, whatever years ago, like, right. It's sort of like a digital department wasn't a thing usually at all, especially management companies, some labels. And it was very beneficial for me to learn what that digital landscape was. And I then started really working in digital for the first probably half of my career. So just seeing like, use at a time where you don't have to pay rent or pay a mortgage or do those things to learn what you like, what you don't like. And maybe you've never thought of publishing or the live sector and these things, but take those 3 months to learn about it. And the worst that happens is you're like, no sweat off my back. I don't like this. Great. Learn for the future.
Absolutely. You can narrow down what you want to do based on what you don't want to do. Stephanie, is it working now? Can we do an intro?
I think so. Check. That's bizarre. Some other setting just kicked in for some reason in this, but it's nice to meet you. Stephanie Hudacek. I'm president of Rounder Records, which is home to a number of current frontline artists, Sierra Farrell, Rustin Kelly, Sarah Jaros. I'm with her, Plant Krause, I could continue, but I will spare you the long list of 50 years of record label.
Great. And while we've got you, Stephanie, we'll throw the question to you. How did internships and or entry-level roles really help guide your career to where you are today?
I did a number of internships. I sort of agree with what Max said. On one hand, it helps you discover what you're not interested in, but I also found it early to be very helpful to getting where I am, to understanding all the various facets of the industry. I started in music as an audio engineer and certainly did internships there, but also did them at publishing companies and labels. And I was kind of cheating because they wouldn't let me unless I got college credit here in Nashville. But I didn't need any, so I had to kind of make up some stuff to get them just to let me in the door and work for free. But there's a lot of people that'll let you work for free, whether it's artists or labels or publishing companies. You just got to get the right person to give you a shot. And there's a lot of doors that say no, but it's always a way to get in the back window.
Absolutely. And Andale, as someone who's on the management side, what would you say?
Definitely, looking back now, most of the internships that I did were mostly artist facing. So I interned for a radio DJ in Indianapolis named Ron Miner. So that was a great experience. And then I interned for a DJ producer named Reed Speed in the drum and bass space. And she was the founder of a record label called Play Me Records. And that was also a great experience because I got to see firsthand what it's like working directly with the artists and like how they think and what are their needs. And now looking back, it's a lot easier for me to utilize those skills with the clients that I have now because you gain that experience of how to interact with talent.
Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Max's point, like it not only does it help you figure out what you don't like, but I really took the approach of trying to intern at multiple different companies with all different sizes, all different company cultures. I think that it's the best way to learn about, what's a good fit for you, different management and leadership styles, and, how you can interact with executives differently because they're all completely different. And I think just approaching each internship, like taking it seriously, like it is, a job for you, is something that I would recommend to all, people who are looking for internships now. 2 of my internships led to jobs, and I think so many of those connections are still, really important in my life today. So I feel like there's a lot of people who maybe think that it is only a 3-month thing. It can be kind of casual, but at the same time, if you take it really seriously, I think there's a lot of great opportunities that it can lead to.
Absolutely. And I see we've got a question in the chat here that's very similar to our next question, so we'll just go ahead with it. But in your opinion, what would you recommend people learn? What tools should they familiarize themselves with if they're interested in entry-level roles at your company or some sort of similar organization?
Excel. I don't understand why folks don't understand or know how to insert rows in Excel. It's fascinating to me. It's that makes me crazy. But I think I'm sorry. I just sort of jumped right in because it's just a sore subject for me at the moment.
It's a great one.
But in general, I think there's no excuse for not knowing how to function any particular application or program. I think it just makes every time I just want to say, you Google it because you can. I had to do a lot of Googling. And even if you don't know something in any company, if you just say, take on the opportunity to try it and figure it out. Being resourceful and creative, particularly in anything, whether it's CapCut, learning how to do editing, whether it's understanding how to organize information into a spreadsheet or Google Sheets, or I think there's just unlimited amounts of tools and programs all over the place, and depending on your area of interest, I think there's a Google search away again, or YouTube search away that teaches you everything you need to know. And I think it's pretty specific to each company, but also to each industry vertical.
By the way, I thought you meant excel, like you should be excelling in your role. Like,
You should be.
great
That
advice.
too, Max.
It's a little broad, but yeah, definitely excel at your role.
Love it.
Does that mean you don't know how to operate? How are you with Excel?
I think it was probably better, like I probably used it more in college. So it's like more good, like knew the codes, all the formulas better. But now with a very proficient level.
Beautiful.
But I would sort of echo that of, if you learn Photoshop, InDesign, Final Cut, there's pretty much no company that you can get an internship with. Entry level, maybe, but definitely internship, because we're always looking for that. If it doesn't matter if you're a management company, a record label, a publisher, like across the board, there's so much content needed right now. You do have to then balance: do you want to be in the creative field for the rest of your career? Well, and if you don't want to be, then how do you leverage those creative skills to get in the door, and then go across to A&R, to management, marketing, whatever you want to be? And that does take some finesse, but just knowing those skills, again, if intern applications and some entry-level applications hit our desk and it is like, this person is just fantastic at all those design elements, they're at the top of the pile.
I'll jump in for management specifically. I think strong communication skills, having a diverse or leveraging a diverse skill set, emotional intelligence are like key. I think those three combinations, especially for management, are useful tools to have, but definitely strong communication skills.
Yeah, I think the emotional intelligence is really key. That's a good point. I feel like as people who are operating on both sides of the industry, for the most part, a lot of us are dealing with artists, we're dealing with creatives, and then we're also dealing with executives. And so it's being able to tap into those different sides of, social cues and just being able to interact with people on different levels, and knowing how to tailor communication styles when you are talking to an artist versus maybe an executive, right? Because there's like a different approach to it. So I think having that understanding of, maybe social cues, social boundaries, professionalism, those are all things that are really important.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, and working with different teams and different groups of people on different projects, how do those of you in management work with label teams? And then vice versa, how do those of you in label teams work with management? What do you recommend for people who are jumping into those roles?
On the management side, I think communication, again, is the most important thing. I always make sure to give our label partners as much information early on as possible, and also utilizing the tools that they have in order to, advance the artist's career, but also being the conduit between the artist and the label to make sure that the artist still has creative control on what they're doing, but also the label is utilizing the correct resources to help the artist. So just being in the middle and just making sure you're communicating the appropriate information to all parties, I think, is the most important way to work together.
Great. All right. So
from the label side,
yeah, go for it. Yes, please.
Is that Max? Is that me? Which one? Who is that?
Whoever would like to.
You go for it.
I think that there's this unusual block that happens between label and management in this this triangulation of communication. So the further the label gets from the artist, the more, and I understand why there's certain resistance to communication between artist and label. And there has to be, it can't be just like free for all communication. Management just completely loses control. They don't know what the label's talking about. But I think the most helpful thing is understanding what the artist what their essence is, who they are, but that requires some time with the artist too. And usually, yes, managers are familiar enough with all of these various components of what makes up, the full 360 full degree of dimension of an artist. But the better we understand an artist, the better we can do our job, particularly when it comes to marketing and sales. And it's not easy to get someone to go stream or buy. And the more collaborative of an approach it is, which requires a lot of trust, that everybody's there to do their job well, but the more communication and transparency across artist, management, and label, and agents too, the more beneficial and rewarding the experience is. Because I think we all got in the music business to work with artists, and the reward is the small victories all over the place. And if it's just teams and it doesn't include the artists, and we haven't decided at the beginning, here's what our goals are, here's what we're trying to achieve. And that is a very collaborative process, and working with managers all the time, ensuring that we're trying to reach that North Star that we all identify at the beginning of a cycle or a campaign or any kind of record deal. But I feel like that communication and transparency is critical.
Yeah, I mean, I echo that. Like, it sounds great on paper. It sounds easy, the transparency, but there is a lot of that push and pull. And some label or some artists look at their labels like, that's the man, and I have to stick it up to the man. But the best artist
It
relationship
helps when you're a woman, right, Max?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. But like, there are the big corporate animal. Let's put it that way. They're the ones that are, there could be a push and pull, but the best is where there's not, and there is that transparency. We do know it's everything happening with that artist world, and vice versa. We'll tell you everything's happening and all the trends, and obviously we're across a lot more breadth of artists than usually most managers are, just from the quantity that we're doing, and then also having the right ask for your label, like going in and saying, where's my playlisting? Ask that question. You should be pushing that. But knowing, like, especially if you're a major like ours, all these resources are open. We can get you in the door anywhere if the idea is good enough. I can't tell you that you want to be the biggest music food blogger, but if you tell me that, we can execute that, and we can make that happen. So just knowing that the label is a resource to execute your ideas. And again, push on the sales data, push on those. You should do it, but know that it's a big, it's a big machine that can help in more ways than just, why am I not in today's top hits or something like that.
Yeah, I also think, just to add, because I've worked on both sides of it, right? Like, I've worked at major labels, I worked at indie labels, I now work across labels and management side. So it's an interesting, dynamic that I think people have to play into. And it really is a partnership, I think, between the label and management. And I think a lot of people have this idea that, a lot of managers might feel like, well, the label sort of almost works for us, quote unquote, right? Like, they're like the bank, or they're, viewing the label as just this kind of machine, like Max mentioned, I think is kind of like the wrong way to approach it. And you really want to find ways to engage everybody on the team and make them feel like they're part of it. Because I think ultimately, people, that's what everybody wants to do, right? Is to have their hands, on the project, contribute to something. And so it really is kind of a sharing of ideas across everybody. And viewing it, I think, more like we're in a partnership. It is the right way to approach it.
I have to jump in and echo what Joe just said, because I think as managers, it's important to manage your artist's expectation as well, and remind them, like similar to what Max and Stephanie both said, that it is a partnership. And I think as much as we have a lot of asks for the label, we also have to make sure that we're good partners to the label and are, helping each other grow the team instead of just asking and not giving back.
Great. Well, speaking of managing and setting expectations, for each of you, what was the most helpful piece of advice that you got when you were starting your careers in music? And then was there a piece of advice that was really not helpful at all?
I mean, I feel like for me, I'll jump in. I feel like something that always stuck with me when I was an intern was being told by managers that it makes such a difference to show up with a great attitude, right? I think just like smiling around the office and being cordial and polite to people goes a really long way. Like you don't want to go into an environment where you're just kind of, at your desk on your phone, maybe you're like giggling with the other interns, like you really want to treat it as if it's your job and take it seriously. And I think it's not that hard to actually stand out and for people to be like, wow, that intern is doing a great job, because I think the bar is kind of low. So if you do some of the bare minimum things like showing up and saying yes all the time and being eager, and maybe taking that extra 30 minutes to, like Stephanie said, Google something or look over the resources you might have, or ask a fellow intern or ask an assistant something before you're, going to your manager, is going to go a long way and be really impressive. And it doesn't take all that much to kind of stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say two on that side. One's very cliche, which told out the gate, is don't get into this industry to sit in the backseat of limos with rock stars. That's sort of what the cliche of it all is. That's not what it is. It's a very, it's a big industry now, and what you see in movies is not what it is. There's a lot. I'm sure everyone here is sleep deprived at all times, and that's not from being in the backseat of limos with rock stars. That's because there's a lot of hours you have to work. And the second, which is probably a little more fruitful, is just look at ways you can provide worth. If you're going into a company and they need, they need PR help, they need digital help, there's something you can do to increase their business. And it doesn't have to be you're bringing in the $10, $15 million brand deal, but just some way you could incrementally build their business a little more, especially when you're starting off. Look at it that way. And that's the way that you can maybe get into a company that's not your traditional admin or assistant role, but you can be like, hey, especially a smaller one, like there are these gaps, and word it delicately. You don't want to say like your company is having a fault. But that is a great way that you can start advancing your career quickly by seeing like there are ways that there are more revenue streams that come in. And the reality is that they're all for-profit businesses for the most part. And that provides some immediate worth.
I would say my most favorite advice that I think of and use all the time was must be present to win. And I can't overstate it. It's just show up every time. And how you define how you show up, is a personal thing, but I think, being attentive, all the things just mentioned, but you won't believe how frequently just being a body in a room can open doors.
I'll jump in for mine. The best advice is probably to build genuine and authentic relationships. I think success in this industry comes in ebbs and flows, and it's important to build a community of people that are with you for the long run, and that your relationships aren't just transactional, but they're genuinely like built to last the test of time. And then the least helpful advice I think I've heard is to try to do everything yourself. I think there's magic in being able to know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and finding the best people to fill in those gaps for you so you can focus on what you're good at. So I don't think it's best to try to do everything yourself. I think it's best to focus on what you're good at and then delegate the rest.
Yeah, speaking of, Max said not getting any sleep. If you try to do everything yourself, you're definitely not getting any sleep. Great. Well, speaking of relationships and how important they are in this industry, who are some of your younger peers working in music who you'd like to shout out as resources for people who are watching this panel?
I'll jump in here. I'm not sure of anyone's age, so I can't say younger.
Sure.
But I want to use this time to shout out other female managers that I think are doing an incredible job. I think Janelle at Valara is doing an amazing job with Sabrina. I think Amal is doing a great job with Tizo, and Lydia is doing a great job with Normani.
All right. Anyone else, or we'll jump to the next question? Cool. All right, so we've talked about a variety of topics. This is our last question before we move over to the Q&A from those watching. What are some of the most important trends in music that people should be paying attention to as they start their careers?
I mean, I'll
Katie,
start
can
like
you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure.
It sort of like glitched out just for a second.
No problem. So what are some of the most important trends in music that people who are starting their careers should be paying attention to?
I mean, I'll start a little more broad-based, which sort of answers the question. Then we get to specifics. It's almost impossible to say one trend. I think that the reality is there's so many trends that are happening, and how I market music today, as opposed to what I did 5 years ago, is drastically different. Top down, beyond the process of submitting a song, is top down different. And so I look at that as making sure that you're on top of all of the music industry trades, but also looking on some of the digital trades like the TechCrunch, DigiDays, obviously how we connect with our fans, very digital centric. Even looking at some of the more traditional Madison Avenue of Ad Age and those places where, while we're not selling toothpaste, you could see that Colgate or Crest or someone did some great campaign, or PepsiCo or something like that. And like, yeah, usually in music, those budgets, but there are different ways you can look at how they're engaging with their consumers and how we can do it with our fans. But that's sort of my long way of saying these trends change so drastically. Even taking like the pandemic out of it, where obviously it was top down difference just from that. You have to stay very much on top of how you're engaging with your fans and look at it from sort of a reverse, psychological way of like, how are your fans consuming media and how are you there? You're not going to change consumer trends, so you have to be where your consumer trends are.
Awesome.
I think in management, I was going to say, I think it's how technology is shaping the listener experience. I think every manager and every artist keeps asking the same thing: is how do we build communities? How do we build communities online and convert them to in-person tickets and sales? And how do we utilize like the direct-to-fan platforms to build long-lasting communities? I think that's should be the biggest trend. And then also, I think mental health should be a trend, but that's a whole nother conversation. I think we should prioritize mental health for artists and executives as well.
Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I second that.
Great. Okay, so we are going to move over to the Q&A. I've got some really great questions here. The first one, what advice do you have for asking an industry veteran to become a mentor?
I would say ask for advice and not a favor or job. Like the people that email me, if they've done any research, they've seen the campaigns they've done, especially if they've been to my alma mater or something like that, and they're saying like they can do pointed questions and ask my advice about something, great. The ones who start asking that, they're like, oh, but I'm looking for an internship or a job or this, that's not getting a response. Like, just, if you develop a relationship and you want to ask that down the line, great, but don't go out the gate day one or cold message number one and say that. And also it's a flip side of like, if you're an artist who are looking for a label and just cold emailing and being like, we want to sign to you right now, and you've never known this person, like, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I think we're all juggling about way too many hats all the time, and it's sort of that's just our work world. So I think there's one is trying to make someone's, if you come in trying to make someone's lives easier, is a great way to start too. But that specific direct advice is yet another one. But it's always about where your connective tissue is between another individual, but focusing on where, like, how you can not be asking for tons of time, because we're all running real thin on the time, and we all are in jobs that have never ending lists of to-dos. So that the shorter is sweeter until you start to develop a real connection, real relationship, unless it's someone you already know. And if that's the case, it's a little bit of a different ask. Like if it's someone you already have a deep relationship with, and you can say, hey, can you mentor me, or can you teach me something, or can I shadow you? And I'll be quiet, just let me be a fly on the wall. I think those are all opportunities for learning from both sides.
There's also great organizations like Fem Forward that specifically focus on mentorship. So I think finding different organizations that offer mentorship, but also similar to what Stephanie said, being able to actually give something back to your mentor. Still to this day, I have mentors, but I make sure that whenever we have those interactions, to be able to feed something back to them as well. That way it's a mutually beneficial experience and it's not just one-sided and, always asking and taking time away.
Yeah, I think someone said it earlier about having relationships not be transactional. And I feel like that that is really key. And, something I used to do with, old bosses when I was an intern or mentors is like, I would just, shoot them updates every couple months, right? And let them know what I'm doing. And it doesn't have to be, asking them for a favor. It's sort of just like, I want to keep you in the loop. Maybe I saw this campaign you did, I'm going to mention it. Maybe I saw you featured in this article, like just kind of keeping that relationship top of mind and sharing the journey instead of always like asking for something is something that I found to be helpful.
Great. Okay, so next question we've got, in a new city, what is the best way to break into networking opportunities?
Probably highly dependent on the city, to be honest.
Sure, yes.
Obviously, LA is different. Nashville is very different. Nashville is a lot, you like country music. That's why you're down there. New York, there's everything. So I don't think there's a black and white answer to that across the board. LA is probably the easiest. There's a whole lot of networking events. You can just go on Google, go on any events page. There's a lot. I think also just going out to shows, going out to those sort of industry mixers can be very helpful. I couldn't speak to as many other cities, like smaller ones, but I'm, there's a level of entertainment business in any city. So just seek out what it is. And obviously there are artists playing shows in every city. So, that's always a resource.
And there in Nashville, I would say one of the places that I've noticed has a lot of opportunity for this is any of like the writers rounds, showing up to those, or any of the PROs like the BMIs or ASCAPs. They always have events, or the Grammy chapters always know of events too, and reaching out and asking, where those events are happening. But there's always kind of just there's also here Entrepreneurs Center, and I think that has a lot of opportunity as well. Other colleges have, if there's any music business stuff going on here, there's Belmont and a number of other MTSU that have events that happen. But often there's conferences too, or other festivals that are festivals and conferences, and that is an incredible opportunity. There's one here next week called Americana Fest, and that's got that's just industry people all over the place, and just sometimes can just hole up in the hotel lobby and just start talking.
Yeah, I think that there's so many organizations now, like, Jump Global throws these amazing networking events in multiple cities. There's an organization called Queer Capita that has done stuff in New York and LA and Nashville. And I think there's always a lot of like mentorship opportunities. Something else is that there's a lot of music related charities. So you could get involved and like volunteer at something, right? Like Musicians on Call, and be involved with their, hospital program. And I think there's a lot of different music related sort of organizations, whether they're, nonprofit or otherwise, that people can find ways to network.
I think there's too many networking events in LA. I would say LA, Nashville, and London are the 3 places I frequent the most. But I think, again, if you're wanting to break into the business, it's more important to go to the executive facing events versus wanting to be around talent. I think educational based events are also great. I know Grammy U does different things. So I think just really, again, back to what Stephanie said, Google and just figuring out. I think Eventbrite has like free networking industry events all the time as well too. And then just keeping in the know with what's happening in your community and the music that you love to listen to.
Yeah, actually, want to double down on what Stephanie said of the conferences, especially they don't really have as much anymore. Like Billboard used to have a lot of conferences, and Polestar still exists. There are a number of those, and they're not necessarily super inexpensive to go to, but you will get some of the more executive level, and that's where you go have your pointed questions. Be right, like that executive's in the room. I remember I got a job I wanted when I was in college, and I found the person who ran that tour and befriended him. I had a whole little speech that I made, and we ended up spending 2 hours in the hotel bar because I just had this great little spiel with him. So those, again, I think they were a little more prevalent probably before the pandemic, but they're still out there.
I'm going to drop this calendar thing in the chat here. Surefire does this great industry calendar, and it has everything. I mean, I haven't found something that's missing on there yet, but everything throughout the whole industry and on a certainly on a domestic level, but also some of the global level.
I'd also jump in and say you can create your own networking opportunities, right? If you're interning or working in a new city, grab coffee with the people that you're working with and start to build those relationships, because that's going to really help you as you continue to build up your career. Okay, so back to mental health. What are some effective ways to prioritize your well-being in an industry like this?
Oh man, how are you guys doing on this one? Should we rank this? How are we doing on a 1 to 10 on our internal?
To Joe's point, there is the Jump Global Conference that is based entirely on that. So
there you go.
I think for managers, we're on like 24/7. So the biggest thing I would say is to constantly reestablish boundaries. Constantly, just to make sure that, you can't pour from an empty vessel. But also for all of my clients, there's so many great resources. Music Cares offers a lot of tools as well for mental health. But I think it's just having the space to have, those honest conversations, whether it's an easy one or a hard one, and then just boundaries. And yeah, I don't know. There's so much to tap into for that.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but there's a bit of like you have to know what you're getting yourself into, and there's a lot more people that want to have careers in music than possibly the economics could allow for. That's not to discount that you should have, the best you can do with mental health, and there's a great point on setting boundaries, as much as those won't be respected most of the time, but you can at least reiterate them. Just take whatever time you can for yourself. Make sure to take some vacations, even though those are difficult. But be knowing of what you're getting yourself into by being in such an industry like music.
Yeah, I mean, this is so to be totally transparent. Like, I definitely struggle with the setting of boundaries. I think it's really hard when it is such a 24/7 industry, and something that I actually wish I had done and set that habit for myself earlier is probably to not be quite so on top of it, even though that sounds a little bit funny. But I think that, like, if you respond to people, within 30 minutes, they're going to start expecting that you're going to respond very quickly, right? Like, so I think that it is kind of managing your clients or managing your artists or managing whatever communication you're having, to sort of not only set boundaries, but like set expectations of, if you send me something, I'm probably going to get to it in the next 48 hours. Like, I'm not going to get to it today. Or, I have friends who say, like, I tell my clients I don't respond to texts after 8 o'clock. You can text me after 8 o'clock, but I, will respond in the morning. And, so I probably need to adopt some of those things. But, I think that had I gotten in better habits earlier, it probably would be a little easier for me.
I think the only devil's advocate to that, though, is if you are just starting off in your early 20s and you are on it at all times, that does give you quite a leg up, because I think
Totally.
that there is a lot of expectations that there are more boundaries, and so the young new graduates coming in who have that energy and drive, and then hopefully you can start toning it back over the next few years and have a little more work-life balance. But if you're willing to have a little less of that balance to start, that will give you quite a leg up. But also don't do that to the detriment of your health too. So
no, I mean, to your point, Max, like I don't know that I would have necessarily risen through sort of the ranks as quickly as I had I not sort of had I set better boundaries. So I think it is a balance of maybe when you're first entering, like you do kind of want to be a hustler, and you want to be that person that's always saying yes. So it's a balance.
All right, we are in our last few minutes here. Is there anything else that we've missed that anyone wants to bring up?
There are a lot of questions in here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Well, I'd say we can do one more question then. So we've had a couple people asking, for people who are still in high school, what do internship or other opportunities look like? And, I think if I'm interpreting this correctly, how can people start to get exposure working in the music world before they're in college or before they graduate high school?
So I started interning when I was probably sophomore, junior in high school, and just set your expectations at that. Like my first internship, I interned at a mastering studio. I was cleaning the toilets, and I was like getting people's lunch, and it was not glamorous, but I was able to use that to build up a little more and a little more. I think if your expectation is that you're going to be an intern at CAA, your first internship, like just don't think of that. That's unless your dad founded CAA, like that's just not happening. So I think it's great to start in high school. It's just don't be afraid to start small, and like you just use that to build your resume, build your network, build a little more, and then you'll get probably some of those more, say, glamorous internships, and then of course starting roles.
Yeah, like I actually interned at Epic Records for about 2 years when I was in high school, which is kind of a rare situation. But it started out as me asking someone that I had met to shadow them, and it went really well, and she ended up giving me that opportunity. And so I don't think you should necessarily expect that, but I do think asking people to shadow them, asking people to just be a fly on the wall. If you are in high school, maybe it is like almost offering to be an office assistant or something like that, like just to start being in the mix, hearing how people are talking, hearing the types of conversations that people have. Like, I think if you're putting yourself into a lot of those situations, like there'll be opportunities for growth, throughout.
Great. Well, thank you so much to our amazing panelists for joining. Thank you to all of you who are listening and watching. This was amazing. And please continue to watch the rest of the panels throughout All Access Fest.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.
Guys.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
That was a great conversation. I want to say thank you to our wonderful moderator and panelists. Next up, we have our next session coming at the top of the hour, but right now you can meet other people in the after party space by clicking rooms and finding the name of our stage. You could also explore exhibitor booths or the speed networking room, but we will be right back here in just a few minutes.